We have a Rockwood 2017 2504S mini light. Came with two 3,000 pound axles, the Torflex, and I recently just replaced, and you can see it in another video I'll put in the description below, this axle here. It was slightly bent, so I got that replaced. And then it had like almost 20,000 miles on it. And then this here, we were on a trip, 5,000 mile trip, and maybe 4,500 miles into it, I stopped at a gas station and I heard a grinding noise. And what I found was I pulled the tire and then in the hub and then the drum, and then these parts fell out, spraying and everything, so they were inside grinding in the hub. So I bought replacement hubs, which I found out I was going to have the old ones turned, and found out for $10 more you could get brand new ones. So I did that, and they came with bearings and seals. And then I bought brakes right here. They're the Dexter brake. So there's a right hand, and it's this K23 69, and then there's a left hand, which is a 68. The 3,000 pound axle comes with 35 pound brake assemblies, so you got to keep that in mind. And then there's a right hand and a left hand. So what happened was on the other one, I think the spring broke and then just fell apart. And so on the road, it was like 5 o'clock on a Saturday, and I was on the road, and I'm thinking, okay, I can't get parts for this. I was in the middle of destinations. So what I did was, there's wires that go in the back they're wired up to the brake system. I cut one wire so they wouldn't engage. I took the brakes, pulled them together, and I ran a zip tie from this hole to this hole to pull the brakes together, and ran with 3 brakes the rest of the trip, and then ordered all these parts. For the wires, what I got here is where I cut them, I'm going to use these wire connectors. These shrink tubing and has built-in solder in them. This kit also comes with bolts. It's only 4 bolts to hold it on, just like that. So it should be relatively simple. So I'm going to get going here. And so I have this lug wrench to break them free, which I've done already, and a torque wrench to tighten up the bolts, the lug nuts to 100 pounds. And I have my impact to pull the lugs off. I've already got it jacked up, ready to go, both sides. So here we go. Before I pull the tire off, I want to tell you something that I found out. When I went to buy these drums at a local brake shop, I talked to the guy there, and he said that the failure of these parts happens frequently. Usually the spring breaks and then everything lets go in there. He said over the last year he's had 20 of the Dexter brakes fail, the self-adjusting brakes. These are self-adjusting, not manual. And he reported to Dexter, and they said, oh, that's uncommon. But he said in 1 year he's had 20. Just so you're aware of that. He says he doesn't replace brakes on any of his axles with the Dexter self-adjusting. He uses the manual adjusting brakes. But unfortunately my front axle came with the self-adjusting, so I'm going to keep it the same this time around and do the self-adjusting on the back. And then next time around I'm going to go with the manual adjusting. He said he hasn't had any problems with the manual adjust brakes. So here's the setup here. So just something to keep in mind, if you're replacing your brakes, you might want to switch to the manual adjust brakes. I have the tire off and I'm getting ready to remove the drum here. I noticed here on the back, you can see these nuts here. They're on there, and the new one comes with new nuts to go on there. I screwed them on. They aren't any type of locking nut, and I noticed no lock washers. Here's a lock washer on there, so they're just pretty much tight and torqued on. I'm going to put lock washers on behind there so it holds it in place. To remove the hub, take this rubber piece off like that. Get grease all over yourself. You got to wear gloves. And then I'm going to cut the wires back here and remove the brake assembly. To remove this cap here, I just get this screwdriver here behind it, pry it, get it fairly loose, go all the way around it like that. Try and do it by hand. It came right off. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the channel locks, this here, and just pull straight off. And then I'll take the nut, loosen it up, and then this whole hub assembly will just slide right off. So instead of using the channel locks to grab this and pull it off, I was able to just get my screwdriver behind it and pry it away. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the nut off here. Then there's a washer. Pull this off. Then when I pull this out, the bearing will come out too. And then I'll take the hub off and show you what it looks like. So the drum just slides right off, and this is what you see here, the brake assembly. And then you can see here, this is where the magnetic brakes grab. It's pretty scored out. And then here in the drum here, you can see there's a gouge. That's probably where the parts were scraping against. I don't see any gouges in the pads themselves. Maybe down here there might be something. Not really. A little bit. Not too bad. So you can see right here where I put the zip tie in to go from one side to the other to hold it while I drove when it was broken. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off, cut the wire, and take off the 4 bolts. Before I remove this old brake assembly, I want to show you something. Here's the magnet. It's all worn out too. So it's really good if you're going to change everything out. Then you just buy this whole assembly and you just bolt it in place, and you got all your parts. And this here is real rough. And then I'll replace the hub, like I said. Could have it turned, but it's cheaper, just not cheaper, but it's just a little more to buy everything new. This side here is considered the left hand brake assembly. So looking from the front to the back, this would be the left hand side, which is the passenger side. So you receive 2 brake assemblies, one's right, one left. This one right here is the left assembly, and you can see here, this here is a good indication that it goes on this side. And then the other assembly, the right hand, You can see this here is on the opposite side of that. So this one will go on the other side of the trailer. I'm removing the nuts here. It's 11/16 socket. Just broke it loose, and then I'll unscrew it by hand here. See how easy that is? That's why I'm going to put lock washers on here. If any of these come loose, and they all work loose, this whole assembly is just going to break loose in here and just jam up in my hub, so in the drum there. So I'm going to make sure I put lock washers on. The front nuts right here came off with a socket. There was plenty of room to get my ratchet in here, but the front ones I'm gonna have to use a wrench because I can't get a socket in there. Here's a left-hand assembly. I noticed a couple things here. These brakes here have 20,000 miles on them. They aren't much different than the new ones. Also, comparing, here you see two springs at the top, magnet, and then they switched to one spring across here. So it's built a little bit different. All they really did was switch the two to one spring. So we'll see how that works. And now you got a better view here of my zip tie that I put in there to hold that. Earlier I mentioned too that they were 35-pound rated brakes. They're actually 3,500 pounds. So the axle, remember, that I have here is a 3,000-pound, but these are 3,500-pound brake assemblies. I'm on the other side of the trailer now. Everything looks the same as the other side. It's the same disassembly. The brake pads look the same as the other side on wear. On the hub drum here, it has a wear on the magnet plate. And this side really, inside where the brake pads ride, it's really smooth. So according to the brake guy, he said if it's this bad on the magnetic side, he says it's not worth turning it. So just to let you know that. So I'm not going to show you this side of me doing it. I don't want to bore you with that, so I'll just complete the other side and showing you what I do. And then it's pretty much a mirror image here to do the other side that I'm at right now. So I'll just skip this side with you. So left side brake assembly is on, and you can see my lock washers on there. So that should help hold it in place better than when it was sent from the factory. So I need to reconnect the wires here, and I'll walk you through that process. So on the wheel drums, I'm going to put, I'm working the grease into here, the bearing. I get it all in here. Work it in the bearing. We got it all worked in. Then I'm going to set the bearing in place. I'm just putting a little bit of grease here for the seal so it slides in, and I'll do the rest of them here. I use this Mobile One synthetic grease. That's what it calls for. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the seal in and show you how that's done. I'm going to install the inner seal on the hub. I just cut this out with a hole saw, and I'm going to tap it in. I cut it so it catches its outside edge so it doesn't push it too hard on the seal and ruin it. I'll go ahead and do this one too. So I put these in and I have the bearing in place there. I loaded a little bit of grease in here prior to putting the seal, so it's behind the seal. And then next I'm going to go ahead and grease the outer bearings and then set them in place and then install it on the trailer. Now I'm ready to solder the wires in place. So like I had here, I have my butt connector with the built-in solder, and I've stripped the ends, and then I intertwine them together on this one here. And then now I'm just going to heat it up and see how it works. I've never used this before, so I've done shrink connectors, but not this with the built-in solder. So we'll see how this works. I'm going to use a little torch that I have here for soldering pipe and other things, and just keep my heat away. They say you can use a heat gun on it, and it's a low temperature solder, but I'm just going to try the heat gun instead. I don't have my heat torch here instead of a heat gun because I don't have one of those. I'm going to solder this with my little butane torch. Be real careful not to burn through it. And heat the ends first a little bit. And just do the shrink tubing here. Forgive me if I'm shaking a little bit, I'm just trying to do it in video with the other hand. And the solder should melt in the middle. Starting to go. And it'll solder the wires together. And then it'll shrink this up, make a tight bond to the wire. I'll make sure that solder works. It's supposed to be a low temp solder. I don't want to burn through everything. I think it's soldered together. Could have used a heat gun, but I don't have one. I'm going to heat it up just a little more, shrink it up, but you got the idea how it works. Before I put the hub on the brake, on the axle here, I'm going to show you what I did. I just took some electrical tape, wrapped around my wires, and then zip tied it in place. And on the back side, you can see the clip here I clipped on. And then I tried to put the drum on. It was a little bit tight, so the shoes were tight, so I adjusted it down here. These are self-adjusting brakes, so I turned this slightly so the brakes would come in slightly, and the drum goes on. And what they say to do is to, after everything's on, hook it up to your truck and then back up like 20 times and hit your brakes, and then they adjust in place so that the shoes are just right to the hub. Sorry, I misinformed you. With these never adjust brakes, you only have to back up maybe 5 times or so, and they adjust properly. what I did is I put the washer in, then the nut here, tighten up this nut while turning the drum, and then got it snug, and then just back this off very slightly. And then now I'm just going to tap this in place. This locking device here, and then I'll put the cap on, and then on the cap I'll put this cover. But what I'm going to do before I put the cap on, you're going to feel a little bit of a drag to it, and that's okay. You don't want too much drag. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this while pumping grease in here slowly, because these are never lubed, so you just pump the grease in here till it comes out the opening here, pumping it real slow. You don't want to pump too hard, and you want to keep turning this while you pump the grease in there, because if you do it too fast and too hard without turning this, you could blow that back seal out. So I'm going to stick the grease gun on there and do that while I turn it. Here it is with the grease coming out. It took about 20 pumps until it came out. So now I'm going to stop and put the cap on. I have the cap on here and the cover, and then I have my jack under here. I have these blocks here underneath the frame. I want to pick this up by the frame. After I have the tire on and everything, I'm going to drop it down. But what I want to do is make sure it's on the frame, secure. You never want to hook it to underneath your axle. You don't want to jack it up under the axle. You could bend it. So always go off the frame. The tires are installed, and I still have it off the ground, and I just have to check to make sure the brakes actually work. So my wife in the truck, she's going to hit the brakes while I'm spinning it, and then once I'm done, I'm going to take the jack it up, and then take my jack out and then lower the tire. Then I'm going to torque my lug nuts to 100 pounds. There we go. They just locked up, so they worked. I checked the other side already, and it works, and everything's fine. So she just released the brakes, and you want just a slight drag. You hear the noise there, and the brakes will seat in. So they said to go to break the brake pads in, you want to drive 40 miles an hour, then brake down to 20 miles an hour, and do that 20 to 30 times, and that'll help seat the brakes in, and then it'll be good. So I'm happy with this. So let's drop this thing down and torque the lug nuts. When you tighten lug nuts, tighten that one just when they're all been loose. Tighten it a little bit, cross back and forth, and then go here till you hear a click with your torque wrench. Here, 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 and then go around again. So here's a torque wrench. I'll try and do this while I got this one lug nut to do. You hear that? That means it's tight. So I go around and check them all, and then when I go on big trips, I check them maybe every 1,000 miles or so. Just make sure they're usually okay. So thank you for watching, everybody. If you like this video, please hit subscribe, make comments, hit the bell so you see future notifications. Hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment and let me know what they are, and I'll respond. And My axle replacement here, I'll leave a link in the description so you can see that video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy camping. Stay safe.